Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Rich Martin podcast. I think this is episode 38, but like many of you, I think I've forgotten as well, but episode 38 from my recollection, which is really good. I'm really pleased that I've been able to get so many great people on, and today is with no exception. I've always wanted to try and get people that are really going to add huge amounts to your conversation in churches, and this is with Bob and Linda Lotich. They are the founders of an incredible ministry, mainly based over in the States, but is now going all over the world, called Seed Time. You can see a whole lot more of their work if you go to seedtime.com. But these people are the best people that I've ever heard talk about money, and specifically money in a church setting, and money and ministry, and money as an individual, and what you do. And they've got such a healthy way of being able to talk about it. And I worked with them on an app called Glorify, and when we found them, I remember talking to the audio editor who put a whole load of their course material together, which you can find on the Glorify app. It's amazing. And when he'd finished editing it, I remember having a conversation with him, and he simply just said to me, "Rich, of all the ones I've edited, that is really good stuff." And it really was, and really is. And these guys are the real deal. Their way that they talk about money, their outtake and outlook, should I say, on the whole thing is totally inspiring. And so I shot them an email and said, "Look, would you come on this podcast of where I'm trying to help get conversations in front of people building church in Europe and beyond, wherever people might be listening, but specifically with a European slant on it?" And they were really kind and gracious and said yes. And so let's jump straight into what is an absolute brilliant conversation all around money with Bob and Linda Lotich from seedtime.com. I'm here with the amazing Bob and Linda Lotich, who, can we say we're friends? Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
All right, we're friends, and we've not yet met each other in person, but we've worked together on some projects for an app together, and I've definitely fallen in love with their ministry. And their ministry is called Seed Time, most incredible ministry that they've set up over in the USA at the moment, but they work all over the world through various web stuff that they do. And I was scouting around on your website the other day, and I thought, why do I need to try and make my own introduction up? I thought I should just read what you put on your website so the listeners know who we've got in front of us, and then I'm going to ask you to speak. But your website says, "Hi there, we're Bob and Linda Lotich, Jesus followers, authors, podcasters, and undenied fans of Michael Stott." Hey, truth be told, I had to Google Michael Stott. Is that wrong
Really?
or what?
Why?
So
I didn't know who he was.
Well, what's the British version guy's name? What is his name?
Ricky Gervais.
No,
No, his character.
his character on the show.
David Brent.
There it is.
Oh,
There is, yeah.
Okay.
So
I didn't
now,
realize
as soon
any
as it
different
came up, I
names.
was like, oh, that's who he is. Anyway, so you're big fans. We're big fans as well. I'm big fans of the British version, but rumors are it that the American one's also really funny. But anyway,
yes.
you say about yourselves, you've learned huge lessons on a journey from being stingy, debt-ridden fools to being able to reach your biggest financial goal of giving $1 million away by the age of 40, and having zero debt and a paid-off house by the age of 31. And peace with money in the process. Now,
Yeah.
that's a huge hook right at the end, which some people who might be listening be thinking, oh no, where are we going to go with this? But the whole idea is you guys are deeply passionate about Jesus. You love his word. You are church people through and through, and you build local churches throughout the USA. And I was like, if I could chat to these guys all about money, all about the local church, and get your insight, I'd be absolutely blown away. So massive thank you for coming on, Bob and Linda Lotich.
Yeah. Well, it's an honor to be here, Rich. We're
Yes.
glad to be here. Glad to chat.
Yeah, and really excited about what you're doing. This is, it feels like an honor to us. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. Well, I've given the website version. Could you give us a little rundown of how you've ended up here? I mean, amazing what God seems to have done with you, and tell us a little bit about Seed Time as well. So a bit about you guys and then Seed Time.
Yeah. Long story short, like the bio hinted at, we both were financial messes in our early years. And, and we both found ourselves at different points crying out to God for wisdom and asking, is there a better way? Is there a way to do this money thing better than what we've done and the messes we found ourselves in? And come to find out, he does have a better way. And the Bible actually talks about money a little bit. And so anyway, so in discovering that, we both been on a journey and got married to messes together. And yeah, and as we began to apply a lot of biblical principles, as well as because it's not just the biblical principles, because there's a lot of common sense wisdom in there. But one of the distinguishing things that I think sets our message apart, what we try to do, is inviting God into our finances and allowing Him to do the supernatural in our finances, because we can do all of everything in our own strength of trying to spend less than we earn, trying to pay off our debt, whatever. Like, you can do that in your own strength, and you might make some progress, but it's when we invite God in and allow Him to do the supernatural while we are taking those natural steps in faith, and that combination, that's where we have seen so many of these miracles in our financial life. Because, what you just read in the bio is just a drop in the bucket of some of the things we've seen God do in our finances. And that's where it all started for us, because when we were trying to do it in our own strength, it wasn't moving the needle. But when we invited God in, that's when we began seeing these things where it's like, we can't take credit. We can't get the glory because this is so much bigger than us. Anyone looking around us like, nope, not them. That's got to be God, And that's the way it should be. He should be the one who's getting the glory for what's happening in our financial lives. So all that to say, out of our mess, I began kind of writing a blog, talking about money, the intersection of money in the Bible. That was in 2007. And we've been doing that ever since. We've written a book. We have a whole bunch of courses. That's kind of our primary thing. And we serve churches and individuals, and that's what we do with Seed Time.
Wow. Linda, give me some more. What about your family as well, right? You're a family. You've got this amazing ministry. How many kids are you raising, Linda, just before we move on?
We have 3 kids, and they're fairly young. It's 10, 7, and 5.
Oh, wow.
So we're still in the thick of parenting. But it is really interesting watching, because what I was going to add to what Bob said is just that it is great. We've seen God do a lot of miraculous things, and all of that is great. And I think that's the thing that we all want to see. And that's kind of the flashy thing, But what is even better than that, and I think what more of us are searching for, is for God to purify our hearts in the process. And I think that even though we've seen God do some, amazing things, we've been able to give over $1 million. Like, it's all so exciting, but none of that really matters if we're still stingy in our hearts, and if we're prideful about, what God's been able to do through us, or any of that stuff. And just watching the humbling of that process has been, honestly, probably my favorite part, because we are just trying to get closer to the Lord.
Wow.
And so within that, we've got these 3 kids, and it's been really interesting to watch them learn through our example, which is funny because we've told them so many things, and yet we're watching the fruit of, our kids. They will, if you came to our house, they would try to give you money. They would be like, here's my allowance money. Here's $2, and it's all in quarters, Like, they are just incredibly generous, not because they feel like they have to be, but because it's like there's this abundance in their heart of like, all our needs are taken care of, and here you go. I want you to feel blessed when you leave our house.
Wow.
And that's been really sweet, and I think pretty unexpected, because we don't tell them to do that.
No, and what I've loved about the little that I've been able to see of your ministry, because it's quite vast, but from working with you a bit and seeing some of the stuff you've produced, is it is about a heart transformation. It's not about pulling a lever or pressing a button.
Yeah.
And I think that the kind of questioning I want to talk to you about is around the church and around leadership in church. And there is this context, and I wouldn't just say it's America, it's a whole lot wider than America. We definitely have it here in Europe, which is this disdain towards God and money because of what we've seen or what we've been involved in. And also, when I say what we've been involved in, what some of us have peddled as well. And it's this idea that there was a button you could press or a lever you could pull, and that would do certain things. And you have this kind of 2 worlds where you've got prosperity gospel at its extreme, and whatever that might look like, and everyone's got an opinion on it, and so on and so on. Really fussed about the opinion. Then you got the other side, which is this kind of, no one really talks about it or goes anywhere. What I love about what you guys do is you've found this great middle ground. I don't think it's middle as in you only have half the generosity of prosperity gospel, so to speak. I just mean you found this way to be able to say, hey, God, it is a good God, and He wants to be involved in your finances and let us help you
Yeah.
navigate through that. How have you addressed that in the heartland of prosperity gospel called the USA? How have you managed to navigate what has been toxic and difficult subject of money? How's that worked in churches?
Well, I I will say that one thing I feel like the height of the what we'll define as the prosperity gospel, which it's honestly a term that I struggle with because
Everyone has a different definition.
yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone has a different definition of what they do, and a lot of times people will just define it by naming a person, in which I really don't like. I really don't like, even if I completely disagree with someone, to make that their identity, and especially a term that is for a lot of people worse than being the most vile unbeliever. um,
Yeah.
and so, anyway, all that to say, I feel like it's shifted a lot, at least in America, over the last 20 years or so. I mean, because I feel like in the 80s, the whole thing kind of started, the 90s, it was still in full swing. And then it just seemed like
Mhm.
it's ramped down.
It's like people started talking out more about it, right? More against it.
Yeah, I think so. But
Yeah.
anyway, so all that to say, it's not something I feel like I see a ton. I see a whole lot more of the opposite, kind of like what you were talking about, and or the poverty mindset of it's more righteous to be broke and to be poor. And my issue with that specifically is this idea of when this, and this is my experience. Like I went through kind of having that. It's like, well, I don't want to get a promotion at work because I don't have too much money and I don't want to be like the rich young ruler. And so I was like pushing away everything. And then I read the parable of talents and began to understand, wait a minute, God has gifted me and put things in me. And if I don't use them for his glory, um, that's just not good. That's
Mhm.
not ideal. And so, like, I feel this obligation, and this is what we encourage of our students and, readers of our book and everything else is take the gifts that God has put on your life,
Mhm.
use them to their fullest.
Mhm.
Don't bury your talent because
Mhm.
you want to, stay out of fear of all that, but instead multiply what God has given you. The byproduct of that probably is going to be more money. So, yes, let's get your heart right
Mhm.
and be in a good position where you can have your heart in the right posture when that extra money comes and you can use it to advance his kingdom. And you're not going to use it to go fill up your bank accounts or whatever else, but use it for his glory. And then now you've used the gifts that he's given you for his glory. And then you've taken the byproduct of that, which is more money. You're using that for his glory. Kingdom is moving forward. It just feels right. That
Mhm.
feels like the right posture from what I see biblically.
Mm. And what do you think then in churches then? What have you found in this new way? So, we all had the televangelist days and all the stuff that we saw, which is like, oh gosh, like God and money must be that. What have you
Yep.
found like springing up? What's the new that's coming through of, because Europe's probably a whole lot different to America. It is. I know from a tiny bit of my travel over in America and some throughout Europe. It is a very, very different culture when it comes to just money outside of the Christian scene. In
Yeah.
America, in America, if you have a really nice car, people look and go, "Pff, they've done really well for themselves." In Europe, if if you have a really nice car, I'm not saying it's always this, but the mindset is they must sell drugs. Just like it starts there. That's the starting point. So America's got this amazing like championing culture and just belief. Like, look at them, they've done really well. Europe is this kind of, well, look, who do they think they are? There must be something dodgy going on there because you couldn't possibly have such a nice car by just
Yeah.
working a normal job. You've got to do something unusual for that.
Yeah.
What have you found? And so that obviously, seeps into the church world because it just is. It's just part and parcel of the makeup of building church. What have you found in the new? What is the new that's becoming healthy in the churches that you're seeing that you're working with when it comes to the kind of concept of money and people in the church and money and the church and money? What are you seeing?
Yeah. I don't know. I I think the churches that we're seeing really healthy have this holistic balance and understanding of all of that stuff. And it's so easy with money to get in a seat of judgment, like you're talking about there. You see someone with a car, and then you're just judging them,
Mhm.
and it's so easy to do that. But I feel like when we understand that each of us has a different assignment on our lives from
Mm.
God, and we're going to need a different amount of provision to fulfill what He has called us to do,
Mhm.
it removes the judgment aspect of it. And
Mm.
so, if I'm a missionary in Africa versus if I am called to whatever, to minister to the Hollywood elites or something, it's like the level of provision that I am going to need in both those situations is very, very different. But they're both unique calls from God that God is using in His beautiful tapestry to accomplish His purposes on the earth,
Mhm.
Mm.
and they're both very significant, very important. Um, and that's why it's so, I think, key to be in this place of balance and to, yeah, and to see it through the right lens.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think just uh, where I see culture influencing church, or as it's been in the past, is more of the, well, we don't really talk about money type of thing unless
Yep.
it's time that we want an offering. And when you see a healthier church in that way, it's because they're talking about money the way the Bible talks about money, which is a
Which
lot.
is all the time.
Because like not shying away from it. And the reason is it's not because, they're trying to get you to do something or manipulate you. It's actually just education in what God says about it and how to view it differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, there's so much stuff there that I feel like if we're just constantly like shutting that down and being like, we're not gonna talk about money because that'll make us seem fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
us seem like we're preaching the prosperity gospel. Then the problem with that is we're not actually doing it the way that God wants us to do it. Like he warns us so many times about money. But if you think about it, like there were a lot of people that God pointed out in the Bible that had a lot of wealth that were still living righteously. So
Mm.
the answer is not to get rid of money, and it's also not to have a lot of it. That's not the answer. The answer is to um see it the way God sees it, which is that as a tool. And when you're viewing it as a tool, and when you're viewing God as your provider, not just as this some far off thing that hopefully this all works out, but if he says, I am your provider, I
Mm.
was talking to Bob about it this
Mm.
way. If I am an ambassador, right? We are ambassadors for Christ. If I'm an ambassador going to another nation, they're going to find me a house that is secure. They're
Mm.
going to provide me with what I need to be in that country.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's the same for us living here.
Mm.
When God sends us to do a job, which if we're believers, if we believe in God and we're here on mission from him, then he is going to supply us with what we need for our job while we're here.
Mm.
Instead of the give me more, I just want more mentality, which I think is what at least most Westerners have, where it's just like, well, I should be able to give, but I want to make sure my family is taken care of first. And it's like, well, no, that's actually not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to obey God first,
Wow.
and he says that he will take care of you.
Mm.
But if you're not obeying him, then I think what the result is just unbiblical.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it can take you in either direction of having a whole lot more or a whole lot less.
And this is what I love about what you're doing, guys, is that, you know, the money topic is as soon as you talk about money in church, it is kind of like income in, expenditure out, increase my income, and then I'll be able to do more out, right? And it gets
Yeah.
very and it's difficult to snap out of it. And you've got this way of going round the back and talking about identity. Like you've just talked about identity a lot there, of like
Mhm.
finding out who you are and dealing with heart issues, and then within all of that, the money thing is part and parcel of it. What's, when you walk into a church that's invited you in, what's a typical kind of audit that you do to say, right, where do we start here? Like, I'm just thinking people who are listening who run churches, what's the kind of starting point to essentially help people out in all different money stages. What's the starting point? Where do you go to help a church out? What does a church leader need to do?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, the process that we take our students through, I mean, I think this just generally applies to what we're talking about here. Like, we take them through a process of first understanding that they are stewards, they're managers
Mhm.
of what God has entrusted to us. Because when you understand that, like, that changes the game.
Mhm.
When you understand that everything that you have in your possession isn't actually yours, but is His, put on loan to you to be used for His glory.
Mhm.
And, and obviously, Parable of Talents isn't just about money, but it also is about money.
Yeah.
It's about all the things that God has kind of entrusted to us. But anyway, that's one of the things that we help students understand first. And then the byproduct of that is, okay, well, if we are managers of something, if we are managers of this money or managers of the assets that we have or retirement accounts or whatever, um, the next question that I think comes up is, or the next thing that we try to take students through is, all right, if that's the case, good managers know what they're responsible for. And I think so often, so many of us, because money has become so much more complicated over the last 25 years, it used to be a whole lot easier for our parents with just cash and maybe a checkbook. But it's like now we have all of these apps and subscriptions and money's going everywhere all the time. And none of us have any idea what's going on. And so that's the first step is, we lead people to, all right, now that you know and you understand your manager, good managers know what they're responsible for. So how do we pay attention and find out what are you actually managing? What are you actually responsible for? Because a surprising number of people that we talk to in churches and out of churches have no idea. And they're just going day in, day out. Money's coming in from paycheck, feels tight. I don't really know why. And, so we help them get on track and actually know what they're managing. And then by doing that, you're in a better position to kind of move forward. And so that's kind of, I think, the first thing that we see a lot of that we try to help them navigate through.
Wow. And then when it comes to like, I'm on the church topic here, Linda and Bob. I'm totally, love the local church, but when it comes to the church and giving, by the way, for anyone listening, the best article I've read on tithing is Bob and Linda's article. It's on your website. It's not a quick 3-minute read. It's brilliant. I
It's
absolutely
long,
loved
but
reading
thank
it.
you.
It's long, yeah. Chat GPT could have shortened that, Bob, but it wasn't out at that time. So no, it's long, but it's long. But sorry, even on that's the point. It actually takes time to teach it. And
Yeah.
I grew up where, churches, you were given, a 4-minute slot and you were told about tithing every week. And it was like, well, for 4 minutes every week. And essentially just come away with, if
Yeah.
you don't do it, you're going to burn in hell. So you just
So
think,
true.
I need to just do it.
And you better do it cheerfully.
Yeah, and you got to. So and you think, well, but what I love, as much as you say it's long, like that's what I also loved about it, which is this is complicated. Like it isn't just as simple. There is a simple equation, right? But that simplicity lands different for everyone, and everyone's in a different space and place. And I
Yeah.
love the grace and the gentleness and the kindness that came with what you've got. And it's a blooming hot topic now. My Instagram and TikTok's blowing up with everyone's opinion of what tithing is. Someone's like it's 10% of your foreskin, someone else like it's 5% of a leg, and someone else is like it's 15 sheep and it's all the Levitical law, right? It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. And it's a wash. And what I loved about reading yours is it cut right through it and was just saying, actually, here's what the Bible says. And it was really graceful. So but when it comes to giving and churches asking for money and that kind of concept and that whole mixture of stuff, how do you handle that in a church setting? How do you speak with a church leader? What's your advice to them about helping people through it? Where do you start? Sorry
Mhm.
about the foreskin. I'm just apologizing now. I'm sensing
Yeah.
that wouldn't have worked over in America, but maybe the
That's a
European
good
audience are really happy with it.
it's a good podcast when you bring foreskin into
Okay,
it.
it's clickbaity. It might work.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. I don't know. Do you
Well,
want to start?
I mean,
We got a lot of thoughts on
we
this.
have a lot of thoughts. And, I think it all has to, you got to take it with, wherever your heart is in it. Because each individual has a different spot. But what I would love to see, I'll just do that. How about this is what I would love to see.
Come on,
Okay.
Linda. Come on.
I would love to see longer than a 4-minute slot of about giving because, well, and it is probably my opinion, but I love giving. I think it is awesome. And I think once you get a realization of how good it is
Mm,
and how you can honor the Lord with what you've been given and what you've been entrusted with,
mm,
it becomes a lot more holy. And I've told Bob, I'm like, I would almost love to see part of it be part of the worship and the music. Cause you have all these people singing and you're getting riled up in the Lord about singing these songs about what he said in his word or who
mm.
he is or all that stuff. And then you kind of move into like announcements and whatever. I mean, this is how the American church is set up.
Yeah.
Move into announcements and whatever. And I wish that there was more of that. God, this is who you are. And as I am coming to bring a tithe,
Yeah.
this is what you have said about it. And this is what you have promised me.
Mm.
And so, part of it is focusing more on him as provider.
Mm.
Like, I don't think that we get it. I I don't fully understand it. And I've been really pressing in on this subject with the Lord of like, what does it mean? Because I'll tell you what, maybe a year ago, we went into some more difficult times, some leaner financial times. And I had some moments of freak out to where I was like, Bob, why aren't you freaking out? And he's like, will you just, are you serious right now? And I was like, I'm looking at what's happening and I'm not seeing how this is going to work out. But what we need to be doing is looking back at like, what about all these times when he has provided?
Yeah.
How did we just forget about all of that?
Yeah.
And so really leaning into who God is in that area, I would love to see more of that. I'd also love to see more of just what the Bible says as far as educating people about how to view and handle money,
Mm.
because there's a lot of that information. We talked one time about the cheerful giving, and I remember hearing that growing up, and I was like, I just feel guilty because I feel like it's hard to feel cheerful when I do feel either a little bit pressured into it or kind of like just flippantly like, okay, I'm going to make this quick decision and just hope it all works out.
Yeah.
And what does that say? That's in 2 Corinthians. And then,
What cheerful giving? Yeah,
yes,
2 Corinthians 9, 1 Corinthians 16.
talks
Is that what
about,
you want to talk about?
yes, go ahead. You finish
Yeah,
it
so
for
1
me.
Corinthians 16 talks about, Paul's talking about uh, this idea of when you get paid, I want you to set it aside so that when I get there, it's sitting there ready to go. And this has such practical implications for
Yeah.
us today, because this is what we began doing many, many years ago, because we found it made giving so much more fun. And so it was very selfish in that way.
But
like the point,
hear that. It's like he says, do this in 1 Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians, it says you should be giving cheerfully. It's actually just alluding back to, I've already told you how to do it and make it good. So when it's time to give, you can be happy about it. Do you know what I mean? Instead of you should be giving cheerfully.
yeah, so it's practical instruction that he gave to the Corinthian church that he assumed they were operating under. And out of that, because of that practical instruction, they were able to give
Yeah.
cheerfully. And anyway, so yeah, there's a lot there. But one
This
other
is-
piece I would add to this
Go.
is just that I think it's really important for leaders of the church to understand this idea that God is their provider. And again, like this is something that it's easy to roll your eyes at. I've heard this. I know Philippians 4:19, blah, blah, blah. Like, but the truth there is, we've encountered too many churches where the pastor and the leadership team views their congregation as their provider, views the offering for this
Yeah.
week as their provider.
Mhm.
And it's like, and just like anyone else, as an employee, it's like, well, it's easy to view your, employer as your provider.
Right.
It's like, it's just not true. That is the channel that God is using at the moment to provide, but that is not the only way he can do it.
Mhm.
And so anyway, that's just an important but not easy thing to do that that again, like I want to see more church leaders grow in that area, you
Yeah,
know?
because then when it does come time for offering and tithes, you're coming from a completely different place than if you're depending on them to pay your paycheck
Yeah.
or to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
But knowing that God's your provider and then just being like, this is actually for your benefit to be part of what God is doing
Yeah.
in this church, you know?
Just to string together, like you've got this really sweet spirit about the way you guys go about it, because it is this in identity that you go after. It's the heart, it's holiness. You've not gone anywhere else. You linger around that, and then it's this. You've just thrown into the mix this like slower burn. It's the let the scriptures go in. Let the understanding drop. There's a phrase in England which is the penny, as in the pounds are made of pennies. The penny drops in farthings, and the farthing is like an old British coin that used to be made up of, a penny used to be made up of lots of farthings.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't need that money anymore now. It's the idea that the penny drops is this idea it goes from your head to your heart, but the penny drops in farthings, this slow, like let
Yeah.
it layer in. And I love it when I talk to you and I've read some of the stuff you've got, because you like layer up in this slow. There is not one singular button. There is not one lever that's suddenly going to transform it. You're not
Yeah.
going to have the whitest teeth in the world and the biggest mansion at the end of this 7-week session. It's just not about that. It's about your identity. It's about the slower burn. It's about the holiness. It's about the things that we read in the Bible. But then listening to what you just said there, I could go all day, but I'll kind of start wrapping it up in a bit. Otherwise, you'll start charging me. Just a joke. But what about, it's easy to listen to, but I could imagine church leaders sat there today listening to this thinking, yeah, it's all right, but I got 3-4 staff that I've got to pay. I've got
Yep.
a mortgage that's coming through. I've got, all the usual things that go with church. It's like, if I don't do what I've received from my predecessor, which is make sure the foot is on the gas of this kind of way that we do this stuff, like
Yeah.
it isn't going to work. Or even worse, we're already in negative every month.
Yep.
And how do I go up from that? And then listening to you, it's kind of like a pipe dream stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I'd love to spend months just letting people flake around, chatting about the things of the Bible, trusting God. But the reality is, someone's not going to have food on the table at the end of the month. It's back to the tension.
Yeah.
I'm being over dramatic, but it's back to the
Mhm.
tension. What's your kind of advice there?
No, I mean, then that is a very real
Yeah.
issue. Like, and we completely understand that. Like, that is the way that it is. And outside of, for the individuals in your church, it's the same way. It's the same thing
Right.
where, like, there's a reason, I don't know what it is over there, but over here, it's about 2.5% of Christians tithe. And there's a reason why, because they're faced with that same thing. It's like,
Mhm.
I got bills to pay. I can't give out 10%. And so I think this whole thing, it's not about necessarily changing what you're doing, but it's more about the heart posture and getting to that place with the Lord where you are trusting in Him as your provider more than you are the average weekly tithes that come in each week. And again, I know full well this is easy to say, hard to do. Like it is not an easy thing to do. But
Well, we've been in this position before
yeah,
because we run our own business. And there are times where it's just like, oh, that's not.
yeah, we don't run a church, but we do have a staff
Right.
who like to eat and live indoors, just like most church employees. And so, like, we understand that part of it, that component. But anyway, there's something there about getting to that place where your heart is like, God, I trust you more than I trust what's coming in each week.
Mm.
And the other part of this too, and honestly, this is why we exist, is to help churches do the practical piece with their people so they can have more money to give and so they can be in a heart posture to want to give more. Like, because this is what we hear from our students and different churches all the time. Like, we just got off a call with a church last week and they were talking about how after going through our class, all of the tithers started increasing their giving. The ones who hadn't tithed, like a lot of them began tithing or at least increased it. And and they were left with a lot of practical tools to actually increase the money that they have. So, I mean, hopefully you know this by now. We're not in the arm twisting thing. Like, we don't create a class where we just yell at people and bash them over. You better tithe or we're going to get you and God's going to get you. And, like, we have just found that doesn't work. And I think that there might be certain people it works for, but at the end of the day, like, times have changed, and that thing I don't think yields a lot of benefit. But when we can empower them to understand as their managers, we can inspire them to give, and we can arm them with more money coming in, like, it creates this beautiful thing where it just helps solve a lot of these problems.
So such a resource. To wrap this up, guys, because I could genuinely keep talking. I love the spirit that you guys go out and learn every time chatting to you. What are the resources that some people in the churches that are listening to could tap into pretty much straight away that you've got off the shelf
Yeah.
at Seed Time Ministry?
Yeah, so we have one primary course that our main focus right now is partnering with as many churches as possible, and it's called True Financial Freedom. And it's just a 6-week course that we take students through. The other thing is we have a book called Simple Money, Rich Life. For those who aren't interested in a video course, like, this is a great Bible study to do. We have tons of churches doing that as a Bible study. Both of them cover a lot of the same content.
Book study.
Yeah, book study,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's not the Bible.
It's not the Bible. It's got a lot of Bible in it, but anyway, both of them cover a lot of the same content. And again, our heart and our passion with it is we just want to see the church thrive and be in this beautiful place, like where we were asking this question. It's like, what would it look like if everyone is giving in the church the way that they should? And what it gets to this point where it's like, the church leaders have to tell people, it's like, hey, we don't need it anymore. We're good. Like, and it's like, that's such a foreign concept. Like, we can't even imagine it, but that's what it should be. When the church understands this and everyone is doing their part, trusting God, and like this beautiful, symphony of what's happening that we envision. And that's what we're after. And that's what we want to see in churches. And anyway, so we're doing everything we can to help move more and more of the church in that direction.
And I think you're like one of the best kept secrets when it comes to this stuff, because honestly, I was searching around. I said earlier before we started recording, I was searching around to try get some people to help for the app that I was working with, Glorify. And we wanted to get someone different, but someone who was on point. And we stumbled into yours. We were like, where have these people been? We hadn't stumbled across them before. And I think it's because, it doesn't have the kind of get rich quick scheme plastered all over it. It's far from it. And total hats off to you guys. And for anyone listening who wants to know more, where do they go? What do they type into the World Wide Web?
Yeah. Yeah. You can just visit us on seedtime.com, seedtime.com. And we just have a tab on there for churches, and you can go find out about some of our resources there.
Yeah. And we're at Seed Time on Instagram.
Amazing.
For anybody who does that.
Yeah. Guys, a huge, huge thank you. Thank you for what you've stepped out to do. Thank you for your just simplicity of wanting to genuinely help people out, and the gift that God's obviously put on your lives. And thank you for jumping on here with me.
Of course. Thank you so much again for allowing us to come on and share and chat. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to it.
Well, there we have it. Episode 38, I think. It was 38, yeah, 38. Wrapped up there with Bob and Linda Lotich. And what a brilliant couple they are. And their passion is just so evident in how they speak, in the way that they go about doing life. Just really inspired. And I know that I've been looking at a whole lot more of their stuff. I know I mentioned it in there, but it's well worth going over to his and Linda's website, seedtime.com, checking out all their material, but definitely check out some of his blogs and articles as well. The one on tithing I've mentioned is just really, really good to read. And a whole heap of other stuff. They've got great stuff. And if you're running church, why not think about bringing them in? I can vouch for them. They're the real deal and do incredible work. So massive thanks, and have a great, great rest of your week.